Okay, so it's my absolute great pleasure to interview Gabriela Maldonado-Montano, which I've been practicing for 15 years. How did I do? Peter and I went on maybe a pilgrimage to America, and we had such a pleasure because everybody was open-hearted and kind, and Gabriela invited us into her home with Will, and we just had a best time. I mean, picture this on the back of the biggest motorcycle I had ever seen. It only had 2 wheels. It had an armchair on the back, television, ship-to-shore radio, all of that stuff. And we were, taking it in turns to go through vineyards in, California. That's how I ended up being so worldly wise. You just hold on tight. Anyway, Gabriela is just for me, and I think for majority of people, can't speak for anyone else, just the warmest, most open-hearted, kindest. And we experienced that personally. And I was going out and about with Gabriela. Everybody she met. Hello, yes. Hello. Yes. Just everybody that she met, I witnessed this instant sort of connection, extraordinary. And I came home wanting to be more like that. And nobody could be like Gabriela. She's so special, very welcoming. And thank you so much for coming to see us again. And for agreeing to be here.
Yes. Thank you. We'll get these fixed. Yeah. When I want to thank, I'm going to sit, I'm going to stay here, I'm not going to move.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, that's right here, okay.
This one's working.
Okay.
This one got the wrong one.
All right. Okay. I want to thank Sheila and Sue.
That one's for that room. That one's for one room.
Okay. It's okay. We'll just do this for 15 minutes. I want to thank you because they invited me to come last year. And last year I really wanted to do a cycling event with my brother. And I said, well, would you be willing to ask me for next year? And I didn't know if that was going to happen. They said yes, but sometimes people say yes and then they don't. So, but then at the beginning of the year, I got an email. And so I just want to thank you for your generosity. So the title of our sharing today is, where are you not taking the principles into consideration? But I like to shorten it to, let's take the principles into consideration. This has been an idea that has been very, very helpful to me. And I'm going to tell you why in a moment. It's been very helpful to me personally and professionally and with the people that I'm with. So I want to start with it's kind of like a story. My husband learned to sail, and so we go into the San Francisco Bay and sail. I don't know, are there any people here that sail? Okay, oh good, okay, great. So the San Francisco Bay is dynamic because of the geography of the bay. So you can get the wind coming from the north, and then in a second it's coming from the south, and then the wind indicator goes around, and then it goes from the west, right? I'm the first mate, so I'm learning how to do a lot of things. But also the bay is beautiful, right? It's just gorgeous. And so sometimes I get this. Hello? Sometimes I get distracted. Maybe it's the battery. Hello? Okay. So sometimes. We call for help, okay. Because I don't think, can you hear me in the back if I go like this? Okay, alrighty. Maybe I should have, okay, have another one.
Well, that might come.
Okay.
Oh, there she is.
It's the battery's low. Let's breathe. How about if you turn to the person next to you and say hello to them in your own language? So take a moment, say hello to people in your own language. Hola, hola, hola. Water, yeah. That's fine. Okay. Where's Derek? All right. Now, they're never going to come back. Back to me, people. Hello. Derek, is Derek here? No, Derek's here. Okay, all right. Okay. All right, come back. Okay, you guys did very good. Give yourself a hand. You guys did very good. Talking to each other. Good. All right. So anyway, it's very beautiful. I get distracted sometimes with just the beauty of the bay. And sometimes I'm at the helm, so I'm the steering wheel. And so what I've learned to do is to keep an eye on the wind indicator on the top. So every so often, I'll want to go in a certain direction, and I forget that the wind and the currents change constantly. And so then I'll start deviating to where I want to go. So then I look up, and I'm like, oh, I need to adjust the helm. This has saved our lives several times because it can change. The wind can change so quickly that you can go in one direction, and the next thing you know, now you're heading for the bridge. Is that me?
Sounds like sound effects.
Oh, sound effects. Okay, that's the bridge, yeah. Crashing. And I just realized how understanding this simple fact can be so helpful. And it's for those of you that sail, it's just very simple. It's like a metal thing that moves, right? It's nothing complicated. And so a while back, I realized that the principles are like that for me. They can be like an indicator, right? Now, I wish that the wind would behave the way that I would like it to behave because it would be easier. But because the wind does what it does, right? Is that just like noise happening? Oh, okay. And these are the natures of the laws of nature. Just understanding that I can look up and I can use this indicator to help me has been very, very helpful. Okay? All right. So, in the same way, taking into consideration the principles can be very, very helpful. Now, I am going to ask you to be a little generous with me. And I would like to ask you to listen to me for the next however minutes, more like if you were listening to a poem versus an instruction booklet. Okay? All right. Okay. So, one of the things that I've seen time and time again is that people are the principles, that we are the energy and intelligence of life. But sometimes this is not evident to me because of the behavior of people. right? So I have an aunt, her name is Lola. You know, there's a song like that. She was a showgirl. And she's a very difficult person for me to see the principles. It's just challenging. And so I took her to Yosemite, which is a national park in California, which I would invite you to go because it's gorgeous. And the whole time she is complaining. And I'm struggling in my mind. And I'm judging her. And I'm thinking, how can I help her to appreciate the beauty that is around us? But out of desperation, I'm just quiet, walking with her. And she keeps on saying, I'm not gonna make it, I'm not gonna make it, I'm not gonna make it, I can't walk, this is so difficult, it is so hard, blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, I notice that she's going, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I say, what are you doing? And she said, you know, I don't know that I'm going to make it all the way to the top, but I know that I can walk 6 steps. So she was like going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and she would start all over. And it just hit me that I had, in that moment, forgotten about the fact that she was the principles in action. So I'm like, oh, let me consider again and again and again and again that even when people present in a really quirky way, in a very, what I call annoying way, in a very ungrateful way, in a very rude way, there's still the principles in action. And what that did, it allowed me to be with her in presence versus me wanting to share something with her so she could appreciate the beauty that I was seeing. So that personally shook me, you know? And it was kind of like looking up at the wind indicator and realizing, oh, I forgot. I got distracted with her behavior. I got distracted with my expectations that everybody that goes to Yosemite should love it. Yeah. So that was like the first thing that I wanted to share with you, because personally it has been helpful. Now, I don't mean to say that I do this as a practice, like, okay, take the principles into consideration as I wake up. I don't do that. Every so often, like from inside of me, there is a little knock that goes, oh, have you taken into consideration the fact that in spite of your Auntie Lola's annoying behavior, she's still the principles in action? Yeah? So I wanted to share that with you. During that process, what I realized is that sometimes I forget that my experience of the world comes from the inside out. Sometimes I get confused, I get distracted, and I think that my annoyance comes from my auntie. It looks like that, and we all agree, right? So I talked to my husband, and I'm like, don't you think that she's really annoying? And he says, yes. Right? And then I talked to my other cousins, right? And we all agree. So what do you think that what does that do for me? Yeah, it confirms the fact that my annoyance is coming from her, right? So during this period of time, I realized, oh, I need to take into consideration that sometimes I forget that my experience of life is coming from inside of me. That the only thing that I'm experiencing is my thinking. And sometimes I forget, right? Because consciousness does such a great job, right? I mean, it's like it takes your body, it takes your chemistry, right? And then I see her coming and I'm like, oh no, here she comes. And she doesn't disappoint. She really doesn't. I can just think about her. So she's a teacher, right? As you can imagine. So taking into consideration that in the moment, my feeling state, I mean, I don't know if I'm quite going to be able to say this, but give me a moment. Because the way we function, and because what we call consciousness works the way it does, sometimes I think that what I am experiencing in the moment is a fact. And it feels true. And so sometimes I take that into consideration. It's like, oh, I'm drowning biologically in the flavor of the thinking that's happening through my mind at the moment. And so I feel annoyance or fear, because she wants to come and spend 2 weeks with us in January. I hope she doesn't see this. Oh my God. God. Okay, I love you. So that's true also for everyone else. Everyone else experience their thinking biochemistry, with their biochemistry and biologically in the same way. And it feels intense for them too, right? So that's nice to take into consideration, that when somebody is really upset or somebody might be really anxious, telling them it's just your thinking might just not be the kindest thing we can do. Because it feels like a fact to them, you know? So I love that experience. I love the experience of being, not in the moment, but afterwards. I love the experience of feeling profoundly uncomfortable or even suffering. Because when I'm suffering, I feel like I'm drowning. And I don't feel like it's temporary. And my body kind of gives me this side effects, you know, not side effects, these like movie effects, right? Like when I feel annoyed at her, my stomach feels like in a knot, like, and I'm like, what can I do to step away from you? And that feels real. And so she just lives with a lot of fear and anger, and that must feel real to her. And so it's allowed me to see her experience and my experience as the same, right? Like I'm feeling annoyance, she's feeling fear. And we both feel like that's a fact, you know, it's true, because we're both feeling it in our bodies. And then we come together at each other. And so it's been very helpful to remember, sometimes I forget that my feeling state is just an indicator of thinking. Sometimes I think it's a fact. And remembering that for other people is very helpful. So, and I didn't want to have this insight with my auntie. I didn't, right? Because then the wind indicator pointed towards me, right? It's not her, it's me. So then I went and I talked to my husband. Well, do you think she's annoying? Yeah, it's her, right? But then there is a little something that is like, no, it's me. It's me. It's humbling, and it can be uncomfortable. But it's also hopeful, and it also creates a connection with every other human being. Because regardless of what they're feeling, or regardless what they're experiencing at the moment and how strongly they feel about it, when I see this, when I take into consideration how we function, it gives me a sense of love and compassion. So, anyway. I wanted to tell you about a lady that I've been working with. She is an executive director of a nonprofit in New York City. That's called Practice of Peace Foundation. And I love her. She's just great. But because she's on the East Coast and I'm on the West Coast, sometimes we cannot really talk in real time because of the time difference. And so she came across this situation where she was losing it, and she's powerful, right? She's this kind of a person that can like squash you in just a second if she wanted to. And so anyway, she can. She's very, very powerful. So I was talking to her about this, taking into consideration her feeling state. Taking into consideration the fact that if she feels hurt, that it comes from her. Taking into consideration that sometimes we experience thought in a way that makes us like superheroes. It feels like, yes, we can fly. Yes, we can do this. Like an anemone, the anemone, how it opens up, right? And it's just like, whew. And sometimes that same principle of thought kind of gives us this illusion of like closing in, right? And like shrinking. So I was talking to her about this, and she came across this situation where she felt frightened and angry. And you know how I told you she can like, right? So she was gonna go for it. And then something inside of her, right, knocked in her heart or her soul or her mind. She had an insight. And we have this little sheet, right, that goes, mind. What am I not taking into consideration? And what happens if I take things into consideration? So from her wisdom, it occurred to her that this might be helpful in the middle of a lot of upset. So, she opened up Google Docs and dragged the form out. And she said, what am I not taking into consideration right now? So what she was not taking into consideration was the fact that even in this situation, which she found very unfavorable for her, there was a piece of her that was untouchable. And so that was kind of like, then she realized that the upset that she was feeling, the rage that she was feeling, was not coming from the actions that other people were doing, which were kind of, let's call them unfavorable, okay? She realized that it had to do with her, that there was something about her and this situation that frightened her. And so we had a session, and she came in, and we were going to have a meeting with the person that had done the unfavorable act. Yes. And like 5 minutes before, she goes, this is what's going on, but I know that this has nothing to do with her. This has to do with me. And so she was in this meeting with such a graceful presence. And this other person was kind of like napping at her a little. And she was just on course. And so I love that. I love that in the moment, we and other people have the opportunity to have insight that will help us. And even in situations that we think are impossible. So she's gonna quit. She's gonna quit. But the feeling state, her feeling state of going through this process has been unbelievable. It's been unbelievable for me to see. So, taking into consideration that an insight can happen at any time for anyone under any circumstance, even us, even when we don't want it, even when we're close-minded, even when we're stubborn, right? That can happen. And that has been very, very helpful when I've been with people that their life circumstances are intense. Because I've worked with people that if I had to figure out a solution, I just would not know what to do. It's just so much. And so I love I love remembering, right? I love taking into consideration that my job is to be with another person hanging out in the feeling of love. Right? So I'm just gonna show up. I'm just gonna show up. And actually, I just saw Linda. Linda and I used to work together in Santa Clara County. And I remember when I was working at juvenile hall, I mean, the lives of the kids that we worked with were, remarkable. And one day I noticed, my gosh, these kids are being taught the whole entire time, from like 8 o'clock to 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way to 6 o'clock. And it hit me how much people were trying to save them, And I just thought, I'm just going to love them. I'm just going to go in there and I'm just going to love them. And then I realized, they are hungry. I'm going to bring food. And then I realized, maybe we can have fun. Maybe we can play some games. And then in the midst of that period, there were opportunities for me to share something. And then for them to share something with me. And for me to see that the prison or the jail was not made out of cement and blocks, and that freedom wasn't made out of trees outside. And so I got to see that we could have a really good time in jail, which is something, that we could laugh together and that the kids could have incredible insights. And so it's nice to remember that. It's nice to take into consideration that even when we get lost in the situation or the experience of ourselves or others, that the ultimate freedom exists in our mind and not in the circumstances that we may be or may not be. That was so hopeful for me. And so, as I was listening to several of the speakers, they talked about how Sid continuously pointed to, it's in the feeling, it's in the feeling, it's in the feeling. It's in the feeling of what I would call love, connection, right? That hope, lightheartedness. And, sometimes I want to say the right thing. I do. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I have this really bright idea. I get attached to my words. Sometimes I think I'm clever. Sometimes I don't, but sometimes I do. But what has been really obvious to me is that feeling of just being with another human being, hanging out, can be like an oasis, especially if they or I have been experiencing a lot of distress. Because when we experience a lot of distress and we tell another person, what do they try to do? Fix us, help us. Let me help you. How can I do to help you? And so we can feel a bit, I feel a bit like put upon, or like, just give me a little space here, just like stay there. So what I realized is, wow, this feeling that Sid used to talk so much about is the feeling of maybe presence, sometimes we call it love. Like that, it's love, right? So what I realized is, that can be very powerful when we are with another human being, and what we are bringing to the table is the feeling of love and acceptance and presence, and the recognition that even if they're going through a hard time, and even if they're experiencing distress, beyond that, just below the surface, there are the principles in action. I'm teaching a course in Spanish. It's a coaching, an advanced coaching course. And I talk to them, I like to share this idea. Okay, this term is real technical, okay, but just give me a break here and we'll speak a little bit more. There is value in being present with others. There is, I'm forgetting the very technical term right now, hold on. Therapeutic. There's therapeutic value. There's a therapeutic impact. When we're just with people without trying to fix them, move them, help them, teach them, nothing, just like, let's just hang out. And the therapeutic value that I see is that they are so busy in their minds trying to fix what they're trying to fix, that if we can encounter them with presence or silence, with a recognition that beyond their state of mind and beyond what they're thinking, they're fine. What I've seen time and time and time again is that they kind of go like, They kind of get into the moment, they get into presence. And then we get together, and then we can play, and we can reflect, and we can have a cup of tea. And then we can see what shows up. And so one of the people that I've been working with, she said, it's almost like a reasonable state of mind shows up. She's 22. And a reasonable state of mind, according to her, is just remembering that there are many ways to look at a situation. And that it's nice when we remember that. It's nice when we are not so fixed in the way that we think things should be. So, I like to play with that idea. I like to play with the idea of, what am I not taking into consideration at the moment? And so just recently, I've had the opportunity to work with one of my neighbors. He's a professor of mathematics, and he wrote a grant for the National Science Foundation in the States. And he asked us to do a leadership part with them. And Linda can tell you that I have never wanted to write grants, never, that's not what I wanted to do. But he said, I want to involve you in the second year. Would you be willing to write a grant? You write your part. Of course, I said yes, because I want to do this, right? And so there I was with the computer and I. And before, writing to me was like, terribly painful. Terribly painful because I realize now that I was into a lot of judgment, right? And English is my second language, and I don't know how to use commas really well. And it was just like, oh my God. And it was just painful, really, really painful. And so, here I am sitting in front of my computer, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And then I just remember, wait a second. I'm mind in action. It's impossible that we can't do this. We should be able to do this, right? So then I would write. And then I noticed I got stuck. And so then there was like, I noticed my feeling state of thinking, this is really effortful, this is very difficult, I don't know how to do this, I've never written a grant, I don't know how to use commas, blah, 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 blah. And so then there was another little, another little bubble of wisdom that said, go take a break. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's go take a break. Take a break, right? And then when I was coming down the stairs, it's like, you really should be working on this thing because it's due Friday. I was like, oh no, I'm going to take a break. I'm just going to go take a break. So anyway, this thing got written. And I just realized, in the past, I have not taken into consideration that if we're talking about the energy of life running through us, or us being that, certainly we can learn to write a grant, right? And now we have ChatGPT, which helps a lot, right? And so what I just want to leave you with is you now know something, and maybe it's very little, or maybe it's a little bit more than a little, but you know something. You have seen something, let's just say that. Take it into consideration. Take into consideration the fact that you can have insight. Take into consideration the fact that you're resilient. Take into consideration the fact that even when you're not at your best, you're still intact and perfect, and you're creative and you're innovative. Take into consideration that you will get stuck and that life will look unsurmountable sometimes, only for that moment, only for that moment. Take into consideration that you have a community of people across the world. And I'm sure, I know this, that you can reach out to anyone in this room, and that we will be with you in discovery of what you are. And the impact of that can be very ordinary. It can be very ordinary, like help you with grants. It can help you see innocence in your aunts and uncles. It can help you develop projects. It can help you figure out how you're going to get out of Valencia, where everything is closed. And I just really, really hope that if you decide to do this, if this touches your heart, that you do it with a sense of love and playfulness and gentleness. you know? So that's it. I thank you. I thank you for creating this opportunity for us to be together, and for letting us come across the world. Like, you know, we cross oceans sometimes, and seas and countries and planes and trains and all this stuff, and then we gather here. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. And we take a break, I guess, now, or, yeah? Okay.